Do you know the origin story of the most valuable luxury brand in the entire world? This is how Louis Vuitton left the workshop of an artisan and became the choice of the rich and famous, and of course, the darling of knockoff buyers. Today, Louis Vuitton needs no introduction, but in the early 19th century, it was just a name of a poor little French boy. As the son of a milliner and a farmer in eastern France, Louis Vuitton had no choice but to learn hard work from a young age. And because he was orphaned before his teen years, he was forced to grow up on his own. At age 13, he headed to the capital in search of a good life. He arrived in Paris in 1837. This was a time when the City of Light was in the middle of France's Industrial Revolution. And there was Vuitton, a hopeful teenager, finding his path in the big world. All he had was his hunger, and he had to be hungry after walking nearly 300 miles over 2 years. Luckily for him, he was admitted into Monsieur Maréchal's atelier as an apprentice. Monsieur Maréchal was a maletier. He made custom containers and packed important items for travelers. In those years, this was an in-demand and respected profession due to the state of transportation. Horse-drawn carriages and boats were the available means of transportation, and the unstable movement of these vehicles often damaged precious cargo. So there was a need to employ the services of these skilled craftsmen. They would never understand why you gave your Uber driver 1 star for that little bump she had on your way home. Back at Monsieur Maréchal's workshop, Vuitton distinguished himself with his dexterity and inventiveness. His magical hands caught the eye of elite customers, like the wife of Napoleon III, Empress Eugénie de Montaigu. And after 17 years of learning and service, he said goodbye to Monsieur Maréchal in 1854. The wee green boy had become a master and earned his independence. He knew he could rely on the important connections he made at Maréchal's place to get jobs. So he set up shop at 4 Rue Nueves-des-Capucines, close to the Place Vendome. This was the giant's cradle that even Vuitton didn't know about. His breakthrough came with his invention of the trunk that no one could reject. Borrowing ideas from London-based luxury brand H.J. Cave & Sons, he created the steamer trunk in 1858. It was as revolutionary for stowage as cars were for road transportation. Older trunks needed rounded tops to allow water to run off them, in addition to being heavier and more difficult to store. But the steamer trunk changed all of that. Vuitton's invention was a lightweight, waterproof trunk with a flat top. Its level rectangular top was a huge attraction as it made trunks stackable. By 1859, his little workshop had become too small for his exploding enterprise. So he moved his wife, Clémence Emile, his son George, and his operations to Asnières-sur-Seine. And he would continue expanding the facility at Asnières to accommodate his growing business. George Vuitton was probably the apple that fell on Newton. He didn't fall far from the tree. And, much like his old man, he could see into the future. Louis Vuitton's trunk did their primary job of holding luggage effectively, but they were still prone to theft. So, George changed their locks. In 1886, he and his father patented a single central lock system with 2 spring buckles. But George didn't stop there. He continued working on this lock until he perfected it. The result was the Tumbler Lock, which he claimed even Harry Houdini, the renowned American escape artist, couldn't beat. In time, these so-called unpickable locks turned Louis Vuitton's trunks into treasure chests. So, when Louis Vuitton died in 1892, his company was in safe hands. Those hands made the most significant branding decision in Louis Vuitton's history in 1896. In honor of his father, George designed the iconic Louis Vuitton trademark. The LV monogram, surrounded by quatrefoils and flowers, were an ingenious design. Besides its sentimental inspiration, the design was also a check against Louis Vuitton counterfeits. Oh, you don't think your best friend's the first to rock fake Louis Vuittons, right? Since Louis Vuitton made his first steamer trunks with Trion canvas, the company has been fighting and losing to imitators. Before the monogram, Louis Vuitton switched to the striped canvas in 1876. Then the damier print, with its brown checkerboard pattern, in 1888. As part of his expansion campaign, George toured the US in 1896. He took Louis Vuitton products to New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. in hopes of penetrating a new market. He oversaw the opening of the Louis Vuitton building on the Champs-Élysées in 1913 and the company's entry into bag making. Their first luggage bag was a steamer bag in 1901, designed to complement the steamer trunks. Later, Louis Vuitton bags would get even smaller after a request from Gabrielle Coco Chanel. Coco was the goddess of fashion. So, in 1925, when she was assigned the design of a bespoke handbag to Louis Vuitton, they knew they had to get it right. The dome-shaped handbag, called Alma, was an instant success. But since it was supposed to be a one-off piece for Chanel, Louis Vuitton had to hold off on mass-producing it. The world awaited it until 1934, when Chanel gave the green light. Along with the Alma, the 1930s also saw the introduction of the Kipel, Speedy and Noe bags. George passed away in 1936, and his son, Gaston Louis Vuitton, continued his work. But the new boss, Louis Vuitton, adopted the use of leather for its products. This led to the redesign of the monogram to allow printing on leather. He also launched the cylindrical Papillon bag in 1966. And after 50 years at the helm, Gaston Louis Vuitton died in 1970. The mantle fell on Gaston Louis' son-in-law, Henry Racamier. Racamier was a modern businessman, and his decisions pushed Louis Vuitton into the 21st century. In 1977, the company recorded a profit of $14.7 million. But for a man with Racamier's vision, he knew they could do better. In the 1980s, he took the Louis Vuitton brand into the Far East, opening new stores in Japan's Tokyo and Osaka, Taiwan's Taipei, and South Korea's Seoul. He made Louis Vuitton a publicly traded company in 1984. Then, in 1987, Louis Vuitton merged with Moet & Chandon and Hennessy. Together with the champagne and cognac powerhouses, they would reach for the heights beyond the Eiffel Tower. The Vuitton family succession ended in 1990, when Yves Sarcel became the head of Louis Vuitton. Sarcel would further change the landscape and face of the brand. He was there when Louis Vuitton opened its first store in Africa, in Marrakech, Morocco. In 1997, Sarcel employed American designer Marc Jacobs as Louis Vuitton's creative director. With Jacobs' collaborations, ready-to-wear clothes, jewelry, and watches, they broke Louis Vuitton's old sober shell. It was Jacobs who authorized Steven Sprouse's graffiti monogram and Takeshi Murakami's multicolored versions of the iconic LV logo in the early 2000s. And his disregard for boundaries sold Louis Vuitton to diverse audiences. Apart from Jacobs, New York knockoff artist Dapper Dan was also instrumental in making Louis Vuitton cool to the new school. After Jacobs, several fashion gurus have made their mark at Louis Vuitton. The late Virgil Abloh, Kim Jones, and Nicolas Ghesquière are just a few of the talents that have driven the Louis Vuitton brand forward. Louis Vuitton started out making boxes, but it was the thinking outside of the box that made it the leader of the luxury industry. Hey, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. You might just win an original imaginary Louis Vuitton limited edition socks.